And this is the Why Use KPIs webinar. And Ed, if you want to just give it a little intro to yourself.
Yeah, will do. So welcome everybody. Good morning. So Ed Grant, the Alternative Board in Nashoba Valley, as Joe said. I'm into my third year with my TAB franchise. TAB is a franchise model where we create an environment for business owners to come in, join peer advisory boards, do one-on-one coaching, use a bunch of tools to put some structure in your world, but basically to pull business owners out of the weeds and give them a place to go once a month or twice a month to not be alone and get help on their issues. And so that's what I do with the TAB business, and happy to be here today to kind of share some knowledge and do some networking.
Okay, and Flavia?
Yeah, so I run TAB Boston West with my husband Jason, who some of you may have met before. Like Ed said, we're business owner coaches. We help coach the business with a lot of strategic tools, with the monthly meetings, the CEO groups, and we coach the person too. We help you get out of your own way to achieve your dreams for yourself and for your company. And we collaborate as Greater Boston with Ed, who's here today, and Electro Gavoni, who's also another TAB owner in the region. And we really value collaboration and connecting with like-minded individuals. I love to be here today.
All right. And before we get going, I'm going to do something that'll really annoy you, and I'm going to launch a poll. This will take you all of 1 second to do. So basically, it's do you currently use KPIs for your business? And there's 3 choices. So if you could take 2 seconds. And it tells me when everybody's done, I think. So, okay, so it looks like everybody's done. So yeah, so we have a mix. So 4 have, 3 no. So that's what we're working with. So Ed and Flavia, I'll turn the program over to you.
Okay.
And
Very good.
you do have screen capabilities.
Good. I'm going to share, and I 1 out of 2 times I mess up the PowerPoint transition and sharing on Zoom. So let's see how it goes. All right, and I'm going to go into.
Perfect.
We are there. All right, let me just get my gallery box out of the way because it's blocking my view here. All right, very good. All right, so we just did our quick intros. We are good there. So, Flavia, this one's for you.
All right. So before we get deeper into the nitty-gritty of key performance indicators, what they are, how to use them, just wanted to frame the discussion for today that the most important thing is that we know our goals and our direction and our vision, where we want to head to. And key performance indicators, they act in 2 ways, right? So if we're on a journey on the throughway, let's say, the key performance indicator, they act as a GPS. They tell us where we are, right, in that moment. So there's a type that tells us our situational awareness, so we can continue to make decisions from then on. And then also as an engine, it can also be a catalyst and, power you in your journey to get to where you're going. So what I wanted to say here is that to keep in mind throughout this discussion, what is your vision? What is your primary goal? The most important thing that you're headed towards, that you want to achieve in your business or your personal life, because the KPIs are here to help us get there. And so that's the frame of mind. Always keeping in mind where you're headed, and let's see how KPIs can help us. Ed.
Thank you, Flavia. All right, what to expect today? So today, well, we've done our welcomes already. We're going to first go through the what and why of KPIs. We're just really going to dig into, well, what are they? Why do we do them? And so we're going to set the stage to go into a breakout session after that, and where we're going to split you guys into 2 groups, and we're just going to have a conversation in those breakout rooms about the KPIs and what you're doing. We're going to come back. We'll do a little debrief on that. We'll hear from both rooms. And then we're going to move into the how of KPIs. We're going to talk a little bit about leading versus lagging, a little bit of nuance on KPIs that folks often don't appreciate the difference there. So we're going to dig into that a little bit. We're going to have a group discussion around that topic afterwards. It puts a different contrast on what we've talked about in the first breakout session. And we'll have some question and answers and best takeaways from the end, and we'll wrap up, set the stage for the future. So that's what to expect here this morning. All right. There you go, Flavia.
Yeah, so this is a quite substantial definition of KPIs. What we want to take away from this is that KPIs are measurable and quantifiable, right? So they tell you precisely where you are on that journey, if you will, and that they're tied to your specific business objectives and goals. As such, they serve as crucial benchmarks for us to know where we are in relation to where we're headed. And the most important is that they are aligned with your strategic objectives or the departmental objectives. So we can have an overall KPI, but each department can also have their own individual KPIs. Very important that they are tied to specific priorities for each department or organization or individual.
Yep.
And, from the father of modern management, this is the mindset. What gets measured gets managed. If you don't know, it's chaotic and you go by feel. Oftentimes with our members, sometimes we bring up a KPI and it's like, oh, I didn't know how bad it was. I had a feeling, I thought I was somewhere along the journey. But when you bring that clarity up, then you can really start to manage it.
So, going into a little bit more about what's important about these were in the highlighted sections of the last slide there that Flavia touched on. It is super important that they're closely linked to a specific business goal. And, this example is going to be just to sort of contrast, how if it's not tied to your business goal, there's not universal KPIs out there. They have to be tied to your goals. So think of it, if you want to kind of think of a personal situation, say, a health goal. Hey, if your goal was to lose a pound a week, because, that's a great goal for somebody that might be overweight. You set a goal and you say, I'm going to knock a pound off a week. That's a good thing. That's helping me get to my ultimate goal. But if you're already at a healthy weight and you're just exercising to stay toned and fit, and then you notice that you're losing a pound a week, well, that indicates a problem. So same measurement, but in totally different objectives. So you really have to, that kind of speaks to the fact that there's no such thing as a universal KPI. It has to be very clearly linked to your goal. So in understanding what it's telling you. So that's an important aspect of it. Highly specific is another one. There should always be a number involved, right? And so, it can't be just sort of, asking the question, are our customers engaged? Well, you want to measure that, right? And so what's the way to measure that? It's a specific number. It's either a percentage or number of customers actually engaging, with the emails that you send them, type of thing. So very specific what you're looking for. Can't be nebulous. It can't be just sort of a number that doesn't tell you anything that helps you understand what's going on there. Has to measure performance. It's built into the name, right? It's a KPI, key performance indicator. So you're looking for ways to either measure the outcome of something from performance or measure something that is an indication of future performance. So that's tipping into a little bit of leading versus lagging that we'll get into a little bit later. And then benchmarked. If you're measuring something, know what you're measuring against. It's, collecting numbers, measuring something just for the sake of saying, well, somebody said I should measure this, so I'm going to just record this number every week or month and go forward. Well, if you don't know what you're measuring it against and what you're measuring it to, so benchmarks and goals, then it's useful. So you have to, they seem somewhat rudimentary, but it's interesting. Sometimes people just say, well, I have to be measuring something. So they create a bunch of KPIs and frankly, they're not really effective and they create more work and people get frustrated by them. And sort of the other takeaway on that is, don't have too many KPIs. Some people go crazy with them. They have way too many things to measure, and so it creates too much work. General good rule of thumb for small, medium-sized businesses, I don't know, 3 to 4, or maybe 4 to 6, depending if you're a little bit bigger, of just really critical things that make sense and that help you really measure your business. That's an important part. An example here. So this one isn't actually an example of a leading indicator. So suppose your goal is that you want to bring on 3 new employees, 1 a year over the next 3 years. So you basically say, hey, in order to do that, it has to be supported by incremental revenue growth. So basically, I have to bring in X amount of revenue or X amount of new accounts that generate X amount of revenue on an annual basis to support bringing in X amount of new employees. So you're gonna, the numbers you have to generate to afford a new employee. So that tells you that, well, then I got to open X amount of new accounts to bring that new employee in. So what are you going to measure there? Well, you're going to measure the number of new accounts opened, each month and year to date, because basically that's going to tell you that, okay, that activity that I'm measuring is going to allow me to predict that I can then hire that employee this year, next year, and the next by continuing to add those on. So you're kind of using that as a behavior driver. You're saying, look, our behavior has to be to get out there and add new accounts. If we don't have those new accounts, then we're not going to grow. We can't hire those new employees. We can't continue to build the business. So you're using that as sort of a predictor of future performance with current behavior. So that's a bit of a leading indicator there. So that's an example of one of those based on the previous slide. Okay, Flavia?
Yeah, and what Ed was saying about, the having few KPIs and tying it to your goals speaks to why do we measure and track KPIs? And the number one reason is focus. It helps us focus. It helps us focus on what's most important. So at TAB, we work with what we call critical success factors, which are the critical factors that will lead you to success, right? So in the previous example, suppose that company's critical success factor was probably revenue growth. They needed to achieve a certain size. And then in order to do that, you start to try to break it down into the goal to bring new people, which in order to do that, you need to open new accounts. And that leading indicator, it speaks to a level of activity, right? It's not just a measure, but there was activity behind, and that's what a leading will be, and it will become clearer later. But, KPIs help us focus, the most important thing. And then it creates visibility because as you're tracking them and as you're reporting on them, you're able to see very clearly where you are in that journey. I love with the visibility, I love to think of, parents and the fundraisers at school, how you have that thermometer at the entrance of the school when they're doing fundraising, you know exactly where you are. And we are all part of this team. And if the bar is not high enough, it's time for you to pitch in. So it creates that visibility that the whole company can see where we are, have that situation awareness to then generate action, but not just any kind of action, aligned action, because it allows everybody in the organization to be sure that they're working towards the same goal. We all have heard about conflicting departmental goals, confusion, what's the priorities, when there are multiple priorities, what really is a priority? So when we narrow down our KPIs to the critical success factor and very few components, then we can have aligned action from the entire organization, which then leads to accountability, right? Because if I'm doing my part and I can see the impact on the KPIs and I know that you're not doing your part, then we can have a conversation about it. It becomes very clear. If I see there's misalignment, the clarity generates the ability to hold one another accountable, which we know is a major pillar of performance and achieving results. So focus leads to visibility, and visibility leading to aligned action and accountability.
Right. And so a little bit more of the what of KPIs. So KPIs supporting goals across the entire business. Flavia just touched on that a bit. Common areas to consider KPIs. Some of these will be like, yeah, of course, but others maybe not so much. Get you thinking a little bit. So financial performance and budget, revenue, profits. Obviously, those usually find their way into critical, measurements or KPIs. Customer satisfaction, NPS scores. That's become a more, common way for people to engage and measure customer satisfaction using NPS. Sales marketing activity, conversion rates, etc. Operations can be anything depending on what you're making. If you're in a manufacturing environment and you do quality checks, you might have a couple of critical steps where you're measuring quality by doing some metrics. You might pull something offline, do a safety check on it, and you're keeping track of those things. So you can think about operations in any sense, whether you're a service industry or a high product industry. There are things you can measure in your process that might tell you how healthy it is, how well it's running. And then key one, productivity. That's always a great one. You measure productivity in different ways depending on your industry and business, but productivity is a great way to kind of measure what's going on. And then different ways for retention and engagement. Employee turnover rate is one that some people want to measure. Hopefully, if you're measuring that, that sometimes suggests there's a problem. So maybe it's one of those things you don't want to have to measure all the time, and you get in and find the root cause and do it. But you may need to keep track of it for a while if there's an issue. So it's really a matter of, in your own individual world, what are the things that make the most difference materially to your outcome of your business, and ultimately the satisfaction your customers get from working with you or buying your product. And so it's a personal decision made by the business owner, by the team, as to what's most important to measure. I think that's the critical part of the what, because again, there's a lot of things. If you said, gee, I should measure all these things, well, that's probably not the answer for your business. You really want to be selective as to doing that. All right, so we are at a point now where we're going to tee up a breakout. So we've kind of just run through the fundamentals of KPIs, hopefully get people thinking a bit about their own worlds, and what they do and what they could do. So now we're going to go off and we're going to chat about that. We'll get in the breakout room. We'll talk about what your experience has been with KPIs, if you have some. And then if not, thinking about what are the most important goals and things you could benefit from by tracking a KPI. So we're just going to get some conversation going. Flavia and I will go off into the 2 different breakout rooms and we'll kind of facilitate the conversation. But we want to hear from you. We want to hear from your experience, and if there's not a lot of experience with them, what things are rattling around your head now after a little bit of exposure to the topic, and then we'll come back and we'll hear from each group in the breakout. So Joe, if we could throw us out into breakout rooms for 10 minutes.
So we'll have 2 breakout rooms, and we had somebody, I was going to be the odd man out, but we had somebody join, so I will join. I'm just going to make sure that you and Flavia are in different ones, so
yeah,
bear with me. So we got Ed, Michael. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Funny thing is, it doesn't let me assign myself.
Yeah, I think afterwards you can jump in, because as the host,
okay,
you can pick one after they're open.
So I'm going to join you, Flavia.
All right. See
All
you
right.
in the breakout room.
Okay.
Signing
Go ahead, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
Yep. And we're back.
We are the ones who are prompt. Look at us.
Well, I know it worked because our room closed, so that's something.
And Flavia, I don't know if you have any really tips for me in the way of KPI with marketing, because it's just so uh, getting my name out there without really tracking what comes in.
Right. So depending on your, on what kind of marketing you're doing, there'll be different measures,
Okay.
to track. But I always say to people, because people spend a lot of money, redoing their website, but I'm like, did you capture a benchmark? What was your website traffic like before? Are you seeing improvements? Are you seeing things moving, more traffic or more inquiries? So just creating that benchmark and then tracking the difference, but we can talk more.
Okay. So we're all back from breakout. Your group was a little longer than ours, Ed. We've been here chatting amongst ourselves. So
Very good. No, we had a good conversation. Everybody
Good.
had good stuff to share.
All right, awesome. So let's jump right in and share. So from Joe, do you want to get started? Joe was going to be our spokesperson from our
yeah.
group.
So we had Paul Laflamme from Centrend, who's it's an IT company, and the main KPI they use right now is customer satisfaction, and whether people are neutral or unhappy or happy. And he's looking to tie that into some financial part of it. So how that relates to the revenue coming in and how his company grows, and maintaining the customer satisfaction while growing the company. Steve at PR Works, basically monthly sales is the KPI that he follows. You would like to take a closer look at profitability. So what's actually the net? And so that's his main focus. Art Stamaris from AWS does credit card processing and services of that nature. Customer satisfaction is also big, and he's looking into how to implement KPI in marketing. So that's us.
All right. Very good. I was unanimously voted in to be the speaker for our group. Once I did volunteer, and then they all jumped right on it, which is great. All right. So Michael Duffy, he's basically what he's measuring. So they work with utilities through the Mass Save program, and their thing is getting out and doing audits, right? So measuring the number of audits per day is a great example of a leading indicator, because the number of audits per day that are happening will then indicate what the potential for sales and conversion going forward from there for the services that they offer in that realm. So that's an important one. So the issue there is needing to be more consistent with it. They have a system that shows it. And an interesting side story, which I really liked, took away, was that the veterans there, they use it. They see the data, they use it, it guides behavior. The newer people, not so much. They don't use it. So now what Michael's doing is pulling that into the one-to-one meetings and pointing it out to them, showing them how important it is to be tracking these things. So hopefully they'll take the clue from the veterans and move forward with that. So some good stuff there, just looking to get it more consistently used, and people then using the data to drive behavior, which is not atypical at all to hear. Mike, as being self-employed, so a lot of things going on. Challenge there is they're in too many places, so pulling them all together into one place will be important. Number of appointments per week, number of referrals he makes, and then new behavior of every 2 weeks now trying to reach out and contact his top 20 key contacts. There's a common theme in our group too about trying to kind of reel in the amount of networking we do and get real focused on those critical connection points, and then reaching out to them and then measuring that behavior, because that obviously would be a good thing. You want to hit those key contacts, but you also need to make sure you're doing it and give yourself a way to track it. Leo, it's a business turnaround firm. It's himself an associate. Their biggest thing is tracking billable hours per week. That basically is saying, how are we doing? Are we hitting our goals? Are we getting there? Clients are there for up to 18 months. So there's a long throw there. Doesn't need a lot of new customers coming in. Needs to bring one new one in a quarter or so. So measuring behavior of what can lead to that one a quarter close. So the other thing you mentioned in that was getting back to putting 5 hours a week into marketing and then measuring contact points per month. So some energy going to go into sort of tracking the marketing activities, I think is what I took away from that. And then Carolyn, similar, being a solopreneur in the HR services, she's bringing that to the world, bringing her HR skills out and helping companies with that. Billable hours per week are the most important one there as well. Still building the pipeline. So there was a talk there about, again, narrowing networking, balancing networking time with billable hour time as she gets busier and the business is growing. So that's going to lead to some things to measure, right? And some activities she wants to encourage to make sure she's focusing her time on the right things. So I think there's opportunity there for Carolyn certainly to build some leading indicator KPIs to help her guide, this next phase of growth for her own business. So some good stuff there, some very different perspectives, and a good conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff, folks. Thanks for the conversation there. We're going to jump back in. I'm going to share screen again. We're going to talk a little bit more about the how of KPIs, and then we're going to have a conversation around that. All right. We are good to go. All right, Flavia.
Awesome. So we already started touching into this, right? The leading and lagging indicators and how they're different and how to leverage each type. This is a nuance that not many people know about. We are all familiar, as Ed said, especially with the finance KPIs. Everybody looking at revenues and profits, but those are lagging, right? So those are after the fact. There's literally nothing you can do about them. They are in the past. So in our group, Paul was talking about customer satisfaction, such an important thing to track, but that doesn't generate any activity, right? It's just, it is, and it's a great signaling. So it's as if you're going down the thruway and it's, you're mile 89 headed west. But suppose that your goal is to go north, right? So then what do? You can then come up with leading indicators that are predictors of success. So if a lead indicator is improved, then the business performance will for sure improve. So it's like you have your own levers to pull from. So you can push the pedal to go faster. You can take your foot off the pedal a little bit to go slower. That's what a leading indicator is. And a leading indicator always entails activity. So as the example Ed said, it was like, how many new accounts are you opening? So opening accounts, it means an activity. How do I open accounts? So I am in action. So a leading indicator will always involve some type of action. So Ed, do you want to move on and give us some more concrete examples?
Yeah, this is a simple lagging indicator. We've sort of touched on this already, but you're looking at revenue. Revenue's always in the rears. You're looking back and you kind of, you're looking at, gives you 3 months worth of data. You look back over time and say, okay, how is it tracking? And maybe your goal is to have 150,000 on average is what you're looking for. So that's your target. You look back and you say, okay, well, we hit it in January. We came up short in December and November. So you can't do anything about that at this point. It's lagging. It's in the books. It's done. You missed your mark 2 of the 3 months in a row. There's going to be concern for that. You've got, it didn't quite hit a trend. If you had a third month there that said you missed the 150 and it's a trend of missing your target, well, then that might spark maybe a lot more interest and maybe, a little bit of a meeting that says, okay, what are we doing? We need to change our course. Or you might look at this and say, hey, we had a little blip there. Maybe it was the holidays, and it bounced back in January. So it will help you make decisions of what you're looking for. And again, always remembering that trends, you're looking for 3 data points in a row in the same direction. And when it's a trend, it should jump out at you and be some sort of call for action. So that's a lagging. And there you go, Flavia.
And then a leading, right? So let's just say, again, if my goal is to increase revenue, right? So my goal is to have, just for simplicity, this is, this person is a solo consultant and they have an annual sales goal of $200,000 in revenue per year. So how can we come up with a KPI that involves activity? So we can backtrack from it, right? So $200,000 in sales. My average sale is $4,000. Every time I engage with a client, I get at least $4,000. So I need 50 sales a year. Which means conveniently that I need one sale per week. And I know that I close half of my conversations. When I sit across from someone, I close half the deals. So I need 2 appointments per week, which means, given my historical data, which I've been tracking with my KPIs, that I need 5 outreaches to get 1 appointment. So my KPI is to make 10 outreaches a week, which means 2 per day. So, or I can schedule this any way I want, right? So maybe I have a business development day and I do all my outreaches in one day. So that can be that I pick up the phone, I call 10 people. That can be that I follow up with 10 referral partners. That can be that I send LinkedIn messages. But I know it's predictive, because if I don't do 10 outreaches per week, then I know I'm not going to be getting those appointments that lead to my $200,000 a year. So, and if I do 20 outreaches per week, then I might end up with, double the sales. So you can see how you're in control as opposed to being passive, right? Looking at the KPI doesn't tell me what to do. I can come up with a plan, but then if I put a KPI for that plan, I can be keeping an eye on it consistently, because consistency is what's going to get us there, right? Ed, what's coming next?
Okay, so group discussion now. We're not going to go into breakout for this one. We just stay here in the main room. So I'm going to stop the share in a minute. We're just going to have a discussion around this one. So to tee it up, though, think about the conversations. We did talk a little bit about this in the debrief already, of what we discussed in our breakout sessions. Which ones of those are leading, if any? Then there were some examples. So we'll kick that around a little bit. But more importantly, the second bullet there, so keeping your primary goal in mind, which leading KPIs could you create to drive activity for your team or yourself? So I'm going to go around and ask each one of you to say, okay, based on the conversation, think about a leading KPI that you're not doing now that you could add to your business that would drive behavior that could predict future success towards a goal in your business. So that's the intent here, is we're going to focus in on that leading one, because the looking at the lagging ones, we all have stuff like that we can look at, but thinking about the leading one sometimes is a little bit different and makes you dig a little bit deeper. So I'm going to go around and poke around on that a little bit. So with that, I'm going to stop the share and go bring us back in. And I'm just going to go around in the order that I see folks on the screen. So Steve, I see you first. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on a leading indicator that might help you in your world.
Well, so we're already doing our best to track revenue. That's fairly easy to see from QuickBooks of what money comes in per month. What I haven't done well is, for instance, track the number of specific appointments I book on a monthly basis, and or proposals written, or the number of proposals closed. So that area is pretty open-ended and probably could use some greater clarity so that we can start focusing on numbers that are more relevant to the bottom line.
Okay. Let me ask you this. So number of appointments, that would still be kind of looking in the rear saying, hey, I had 20 appointments last month. What behavior to set those appointments could you measure? Like, how big of an outreach funnel do you need to have to get those 20 appointments in your world?
Right. So that's a good point. So we do have a number of things that activities, even this webinar is an example of an activity that gets us in front of people. We've got, networking groups. We do a fair amount of other outreach. We've got a monthly, actually a weekly e-newsletter. And so we've got a lot of activity on a regular basis. And so some of that has to be measured for how much of that frenetic activity actually leads to prompting a lead, an
Right.
opportunity.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's always that question of marketing and outreach, how effective they are. But if you set a goal saying, hey, I want to have 15 different outreaches a month of the mix of all the things you do as your target, and then you track that, then you say, okay, we did it. We got those 15 outreaches. How well they did, well, different metric. That'd be a lagging one, right? And that tells over time. But no, that's a great example. All right, I'm gonna keep moving around. Paul LaFlemme, I see you next. What about you? What would be a leading thing you could do to predict future success?
Well, I like Flavia's idea of having a KPI that looks at your customer acquisition to determine whether or not you can afford to hire. I mean, it seems basic. I wouldn't be, I had to have done that at least in my head, or I wouldn't be hiring a person, right? I'm not going to hire a person I can't afford. But at the same time, okay, that's now, and I've made the commitment, and I'm going to bring somebody on in April. Well, when's the next person coming on, right? If I'm going to continue to grow and help more people, I have to grow the technical capability as well. So, and then at what point can I afford an operations manager to help take some of the things that get kicked up to me all the time? So that's kind of where my head's at.
Yeah, no, excellent. Yeah, a lot of different things can pop into what activity do you need to put in place and track to ensure you get there, right? So very good. All right. Let's see. Art, let's talk to you next, Art.
Sure. Yeah, so the things I'd like to be able to track are contacts to new businesses and having in referrals, getting new business from reaching out and referrals. Also, contacts to current customers just to keep touch and ask what they need.
Yeah, so that's touch points, that last contact. So contacts meaning touch points in this context?
Yes, touch points to
got it.
Current customers, yes.
Yeah, excellent. That's a good one. Michael, how about you? Michael Duffy.
Hey again. I think, just seeing that slide where you have your sales goal, your average sales dollars, your number of sales per year, the way that's broken down, I think I'd like to take that back and implement it so we have an overall summary, our business approach, and then break it down by the individual and see what their piece is. I think I think that's gonna really drive the point home. And it's just so, I mean, it's definitely logical. It makes a lot of sense. I just don't know that I've seen it in that order so blatantly apparent. So I definitely want to take that back.
Yeah, that's the beauty of these kind of conversations, right?
And a quick aside, because that generates that clarity to then have accountability, right? If everybody knows clearly what they're pursuing, then you can hold them accountable. They can hold each other accountable. They get excited about it and to see the contribution and the progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that ties really nicely to your audits per day conversation we had a few minutes ago. You could tie those two things together and make them really, that's excellent. All right, Mike McQuillan.
All right, the key I need to look for is how quickly can I get to a pain point when I'm on a conversation? If I get a 30-minute call, it usually takes about 29 and a half minutes before somebody says, I could use help with my public speaking. And without pressuring them, how quickly can I get to the fact that they need what I do?
So tell me, how would you measure that?
In a matter of time. See, I went through a business boot camp where it was all about sell, sell, sell. It's not how I operate. And sometimes that pendulum goes the other way. Let's have a nice conversation. We end up talk. And tell me about your business. Really? Oh, you're in finance? Well, what do you do? Or do you do mortgages? Or do you do really? Where do you get your? And then next thing you know, I want to get to know the person. I want to get to know the business, because what I do is I find that common thread between your personal life, your personal interests, and your business. So your authentic self comes out every time you speak. Well, sometimes, so I get to the question, how do you promote yourself? How do you promote your business? And that's where the conversation begins. Well, you know what? I really don't know how to articulate that. Aha. And you don't want to jump on it right away. So what do you do and how do you promote yourself and how can I coach you as a public speaking coach? It's weird. So to
Right.
find that perfect medium, how quickly can I get to that so we can shift the conversation to what I could do for you professionally? And
Right.
then now we're talking business.
So here's a thought on that. So you X amount of calls a week you're having with prospects, right? Let's say
Yes.
of those, so let's say there's 10 calls a week, just pick a nice round number. Of those 10, I got to the pain point with 8 of them. So I had 80% success rate of getting to the pain point. Does that, do you always get to the pain point, or are there times where you hung up and you're like, I didn't get to the pain point?
Yeah, it's not always so cut and dry.
Yeah.
The issue is most of the time that you deal with solopreneurs, they've already hired the web designer, the business coach, the mindset coach, the astrologer, the aromatherapist, and the masseuse. And now they're, oh, well, I'm still paying for, well, if they're so good, why haven't they made you rich enough to hire me without thinking about it?
Yeah.
So it's where do I fit in the queue? And then are they really in business? Which is another thing you get to. So
Okay.
you meet with people face to face. That's why I don't want to assume that you need what I do. So sometimes it's very therapeutic to find out, you know what? It's been great talking to you. Gotta go. So that's a success to me to find out there is no pain point, or
As
they're
well.
not ready,
Yeah.
or they're in denial. I'm a great speaker. I watch TED Talks every day. TED Talks are not public speaking; they're community theater. You know, if they're in denial, I'm not interested.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Mike. Carolyn, let's go to you next.
Sure. So I like this idea of thinking about the funnel and thinking about the outreach and how much that's resulting in a potential client contact, right? And then from there, the clients that actually convert. And as I said, I think in our breakout, usually when I speak to a potential client, pretty much all the time, it does convert into an actual client. But thinking about that more intentionally about the funnel and assessing the value of various outreach activities in some way to figure out, am I maximizing the time and effort I'm spending on those?
Got it. Perfect. I like it. All right, Leo, we'll go to you.
Yeah, for me, it's also the touch points with two groups. I have a very small pool of actual referral sources, key referral sources, I'll call them, who have actually created action in the past. And it's 3 attorneys and a half dozen CPAs. And so I want to make sure I have a touch point with each of them at least once every 2 weeks. Could be an update on how the progress with their client. It could be a number of things. And then I have a group of people that I've met over the years who are potentially good referral sources, but just haven't had the opportunity yet. And that's a wider group, about 50 people. And I like to stay in touch with them at least once a month. I try and go beyond that to not only have a touch point, but actually to meet with them once a quarter. And so those are my 3 levels, I guess.
Okay. Sounds good there. All right, Joe, you want to add anything to that part?
No, Steve kind of covered my
that's
thing.
why I kind of kept you to the end. I thought
Thank you.
Steve probably picked it up. All right, great. All right, I'm going to go back in. We just have one more slide, I think, to share, and then we're going to wrap it up. Awesome. All right, so we had a group discussion, and okay, Flavia.
Yeah. So just final words that, tracking KPIs, 1, 2, 3, 4, define your goal. What's most critical, most important. Don't want to be tracking KPIs that are irrelevant or overburdening us. Then define the KPIs that will get you to achieve that goal. Some of it are important that they are lagging because they give you the situational awareness, right? But especially creating that KPI that leads to consistent action, right? And then take the consistent action. Never take the eye off the ball of that KPI. Keep measuring, keep refining, and keep consistently chasing that KPI. And there's a direct correlation with results from that. So define your goal, define your KPIs that support the goal, take consistent action, keep measuring and refining.
All right. Very good. All right. So I'm going to stop the share here in a moment. Go around real quick and just any questions anybody has, but I'm really looking for the best takeaway from today's session from each of you.
One question we did get, Ed, was whether the deck would be available, if we could share that.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Cool. All right. I'm going to go around again. I'm going to reverse the order. I see. Leah, I'll start with you. Best takeaway from today's session.
I guess I've got to be more consistent. I think I've got a good handle on what KPIs I need, but I'm not being consistent with it. So it's one thing to measure it. It's another thing to take action as a result of it. And I think that's really where I've got to hone in on.
Excellent. Carolyn, how about you?
I think the key thing for me is, although I'm all by myself as a solopreneur, it's still worth defining things, at least for my own self, in my own mind, and measuring them, and not just having them up here in my head, because I think that'll drive more focused action.
Excellent. I like it. Very good. Mike McQuillan.
My key takeaway is the contacts I made here today. Is
Awesome.
it okay if I leave my contact information in the chat?
Please
Absolutely.
do. And we could do a follow-up email with everybody's stuff too, if you want.
We will.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Michael Duffy, how about you?
Sorry.
No worries.
I think it's, as I said before, just seeing that summarized slide is really helpful. And I think it's just so succinct. I want to break it out to every person on the team.
Love it. Awesome. And Art, how about you?
I think the fact about I'll echo what Mike said about me and the people on the team, everybody on the call, but tracking activity is something that I should do much better. Tracking activity and following up on that activity. Once I make a contact, the following up is key.
Love it. And Paula Flem?
The leading indicators that I lack, I think there's a lot of value there, and I need to implement some of those.
Great. Thank you. And Steve?
You do a real good job of outlining the interconnectedness of the various KPIs. That typically a KPI doesn't stand alone. Revenue in and of itself is a data point, not an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed and Flavia, I think I'll add in that for myself, just tracking touch points, whether it's per client or in our case, members of our networking groups, would be something to track.
Yeah.
We kind of do it and we are good at it, but it'd be nice to see the numbers and see how effective. So
awesome. All right. Well, that's it, guys. We hit the top of the hour. You guys were great. Great participation, conversation. Thank you very much. On behalf of Flavia, Joe, and Steve, appreciate your coming along, and we look forward to the next one. Stay tuned, and we'll
and
be
if
back.
you have suggestions on topics of things that are important to you, email us, let us know. We would love to talk about what feels important to you. So